Hey, welcome to Square Body Stuff. I'm Chad. We've got my race truck Squeaky in the shop today. We're going to be showing you how to remove and install a distributor. Now, the distributor in this truck, there's nothing wrong with it other than it's not keeping up with the performance range that I'm working with here. It's just an HEI distributor, and it's kind of cutting out on the top end. So I'm going to replace it with a unilite distributor that I've got, Mallory unilite distributor that I've got that was out of my rock crawler. I don't have the control box. I'll go over that in just a minute, what's going on with that, but I'll just drop the distributor in and hook it straight to the coil, and it'll work just fine that way. That's the way it was working in my rock crawler, but I won't have the CDI box for the rev limiter or any other controls of it. So here's what we got going on. Just your typical small block Chevy, and the big blocks are the same way. Even your 4.3 V6s will be the same thing. This is kind of a general thing that goes over about any engine, not just the Chevrolet motors. I'm going to show you how to pull the distributor out, what to do before you pull it out. Pull the distributor cap off, mark where your rotor is, or at least take a picture of it. Whatever you want to do there, and then but also I'm going to show you if you have a motor, or if you forget where it was at or something, you know, say you had the distributor out and you turn the motor over and you forget, you know, where you're at. We'll pull the valve cover off, and I'll show you how to, you know, turn the engine over, where the valves need to be on number one cylinder to be able to drop your distributor in where you want it. And as always, if you like what you see here, hit that subscribe button down below, ring that little bell next to it. That will give you notifications of whenever I put out new videos. Also, go to my description box down below. There'll be links down there to my Teespring store where you can check out my merchandise. Also links to my email, Instagram, and Facebook. So go check us out there. And now we're going to get to pulling the distributor out. Another thing I'd like to show you is you can see I've already got my coil and ballast resistor already mounted for my other distributor. I'm having a hard time saying distributor for some reason, but I've already got those mounted. I'll hook that up whenever I get the new distributor in there. So now I'm going to get the camera set up, hopefully give you a good angle to see what's going on when I go to pull this one out. Things to go over, what to look for. And first I'll unhook the battery. It's a good idea to go ahead and unhook your battery so you don't short anything out, you don't have any issues there. Now, as you can see, I've got my wires already marked. Don't be afraid to do that. It helps out sometimes when you're trying to get your wires back on. Go ahead and mark them. Also, I want to make note, if you don't already know, firing order on any of these Chevrolet motors is, on the V8s, is 184365572. I have a very poor memory, but that is one number that I'll never forget. It's just ingrained into my brain. So, but I still, even with that, I still mark my wires, because every once in a while I'll mess up and get it wrong. Usually it's 5 and 7. For some reason I've got 5 and 7 swapped several times throughout the years, so mark your wires. Or on the firing order, I normally set my distributor up where number 1 is right here. That's kind of a standard, where number 1 is pointed. Number 1 spark plug is actually where the rotor is pointing towards number 1 cylinder. And if you're not familiar with the numbers of the cylinders on the Chevrolet V8, your odd numbers are on your driver's side, your even numbers are on your passenger side. So it's 1, 3, 5, 7, 2, 4, 6, 8. Alright, now that your wires are marked and you know where they go, you can just pull them off and not really worry about what order they're in at the moment. Next thing you need to do is unhook your power wire, which will be the red one on the back side. You may have a plug-in that has both wires, because your one up front here on this side is your tack wire. I'll unhook that. I will need to actually add an extension onto this one to go over to the negative side on my coil, but I will do that later. Just kind of get it out of the way. this positive wire I will be plugging into here for my bias resistor, but I will leave that unplugged for the moment. Next thing you need to do if you have an HEI is this plug here. Unplug it off your cap. That way you can remove your distributor cap and see where your rotor's at, see where it's pointed. Now to remove your distributor cap, there's just 4 hold down clips. They're spring loaded, so you use a common screwdriver or flathead, whatever you want to call it. Sometimes you just got to feel for where you're at. Push it down about a quarter turn or so and it unlocks it. There's your distributor cap is off. Set it off to the side. Now you'll notice this distributor the rotor button is pointing at roughly at number 7 cylinder. Now if you're pulling a distributor out like we are here and just want to remember where it was pointed at, take a picture of it with your phone or make a little diagram on your firewall, whatever. Just remember where it's at, and you don't have to worry about pulling your valve cover off and turning your motor to a certain point. So make a note of that, and we'll go ahead and pull this distributor out, which is the mounting hole, or the mounting tab is underneath there. You'll need a 9/16 wrench. I don't have the fancy distributor wrench that has like a L-shaped. I've been meaning to get one for the last 30 years, just never have got one. I just get by with the open end combination wrench to loosen that up. And you don't have to take it all the way off. You can loosen the nut up or the bolt up enough to just slide the bracket back, the hold down clip back, to be able to pull the distributor out. Also, if you've got a vacuum advance, go ahead and unhook your vacuum advance line. Now if I can get around all my hoses and stuff I got going on with this, I'll loosen up the hold down bolt. Taken loose. It's just going to be a little tricky with all the crap I got going on here. Should be able to just grab a hold of it, pull it up, and you'll notice that it's going to spin. That rotor's going to spin counterclockwise a little bit because it's coming off of the teeth on the camshaft. So when you go to put it back in, you'll actually want to put your distributor back in with it pointing a couple degrees, or about a couple inches maybe, I don't know, but you can see it moves back, so make note of that. So whenever you go to put your distributor back in, you can just slide it back in that way and it'll go right back to where it was before. I'll get this out, hopefully without having to remove my nitrous stuff. Now when you pull your distributor out, make sure this gasket comes with it, or make sure it may be stuck to the intake manifold, but it's a good time to go ahead and replace that. If it's stuck to the manifold, scrape it off, make sure you don't get anything that goes down inside the block. That'll make a mess. But replace this gasket, which this one is only a couple of months old really, so I'm not going to worry about replacing it. I will just move it over to the other distributor. And now to drop this one in, we also need to make note hopefully you can see that this tang right here, that flat spot, is what engages into your oil pump. These are going the same direction, so we won't have any issue there. I think they're all pretty much standard where it lines up with that roll pin. So whenever you pull it out, I should be able to just slide this distributor back in right where this other one was and be good to go. and then just have to set my timing. Another thing I'd like to make note of is sometimes whenever you pull the distributor out, and if you don't get it in exactly right, it may not spline onto the oil pump shaft and will actually be a tooth off or so. It's kind of tricky. You could either get a long screwdriver and get down in there and turn that oil pump shaft backwards a little bit, counterclockwise a little bit, to line up with where you're needing it, or you can, I've gotten away with putting the distributor in there, and about every time it goes in and out, it will move that pump gear around just another tooth, and you have to kind of go all the way around until it gets back to where you want it to go. I know it's kind of complicated. I'm not really going to show that, but you got to have that oil pump drive lined up also, or you'll have a gap underneath your distributor about 3/8 of an inch or so, and you'll have a mess. You won't have any oil pump driving. You could also set your distributor where you want it and have someone just bump the motor over or turn it over by hand to get it to engage onto the oil pump shaft. I have done that before. There's several different ways to do it. All right, we've got our gasket on here. Get it down, started down in there. Turn my rotor. I think it's about there. I have to turn it back a little bit more. And there we go. Right back to where it was. I mean, it may be off just a little bit, but we're right in the vicinity to where I can hook my wires back up right where they were. And I'll just have to set my timing once I get it running. And not a big deal. But now I'm going to show you how to do it if you pull your distributor out and you're not sure where it's at, you lose track of your picture, or you get a motor in that you don't even know where it's at, don't even know where to start. I'm going to show you how to pull the valve cover off and give you a good starting point to know where to stab your distributor in. We're going to pretend now that we don't know where this distributor came out. We're going to pull the valve cover off. Well, I've already got the valve cover off, so we can watch the valves on #1 cylinder right here. And then also we'll have to keep an eye on our timing mark on our balancer, which this one is on the underneath the water pump. It's really hard to see, so I'm probably not going to get, I might be able to get a view of it, but I'll set the camera up to where we can watch these valves and show you what to look for whenever we're trying to get the motor lined up to set the distributor in. You want to make sure, if you've got a standard, that you have it out of gear to do this. Of course, your battery's unhooked, because if you have it in gear and you're trying to turn the engine over, you're going to try to move the whole truck. I've got it in neutral, parking brake set, battery's unhooked, so we should be good there. So I'm just slowly turning it over and watching these two rocker arms. Now right now the intake valve is coming up and closing. So we'll have to, now the intake valve is closing, because your intake valve will open and then close, and your crankshaft's coming around and your piston's coming up. Once your piston comes up, that's top dead center on your compression stroke. So now that we've watched our intake valve come up, we'll just have to keep an eye on our balancer till the mark comes around for your timing mark. And set it at 0. So now we're at top dead center on the compression stroke. You can see down there the timing tab. You can see my finger in there. Got the line marked up on, or the mark lined up on the timing tab at 0 on my balancer. So assuming that that's all good and right, we should be on top dead center, number 1, on the compression stroke, and we should be able to drop our distributor down in there wherever we want it and know where number 1 cylinder is supposed to be at on your spark plug wire. Now I want to make note that if you are turning your engine over and you see the timing tab that is lined up with the balancer, that doesn't mean you could be on top dead center, but you may be on top dead center on your intake stroke. So if you're close to it and start rolling it over and your intake valve starts to open, you know you need to go another full revolution to get it to where you're on the compression stroke. So now we've got the engine turned over to where it's at number 1 on top dead center on the compression stroke. We could drop our distributor in and line it up where we want, but first we will have to get the oil pump drive engaged, and we don't know where it's at right now. Well, actually I do. I should be able to engage it somewhere in there. Alright, now it's engaged on my oil pump drive. Sometimes when you pull your distributor out, you kind of hold your rotor to the clockwise position and it'll turn that oil pump drive a little bit. I know it's kind of hard to explain. And then you drop your distributor in a tooth past where you were, and sometimes it'll move that drive around, and sometimes it works, sometimes it don't. And it's not going to work this time. So your best bet right now is to get a long screwdriver or something to turn that oil pump drive, or if you don't have a long enough screwdriver, which I normally use my priming tool, my oil pump priming tool, to get that lined up. But I'm going to show you how to do it with just turning the engine over with the wrench. I've kind of got my distributor where I want it as far as whenever it drops in to number 1. I'm going to move it back one more tooth. Alright, now that's where I'm going to want it, because whenever it actually engages, it's going to come around. Well, okay, I've got my distributor where I'm going to want it, because when it drops down, it's going to move clockwise just a little bit, but it's still sitting on top of that oil pump drive. So I'm going to have to turn the motor over by hand, and this should drop down. You'll see the rotor going around, and it should drop down. You can push down on it a little bit, and once it gets lined up with that oil pump drive, it should drop all the way down and still be in time. And you could double check where your distributor is at by watching your valves, if you still got your valve cover off, just to make sure everything's lined up where you want it. I'm going to slowly turn the engine over by hand. You can see the distributor moving. There. It dropped in. Now at this point you could go ahead and turn it all the way around with your ratchet, or turn the engine over by hand, just to make sure that you're still lined up with number 1. Watch your valves and make sure you're still lined up where you want to be for number 1. But I'm pretty confident mine didn't move. So I'm going to kind of set my distributor where I want it. Get my tab on there and get it tightened down a little bit to where it doesn't move so free. And we'll put the valve cover back on, distributor cap. I'll hook up all my wires and see if we can get it to start. All right, I've got everything hooked back up, running good. I've got my timing set. Let's take him for a little road trip. I've got a drag racer app I'm going to try, see how it works out. Don't know if I'll be able to get a full quarter-mile pass, but we'll see. I won't take off real hot and heavy. And of course this is no nitrous. We're just going to try to see how this ignition is working out. He pulled nice and clean. I like that. I'll have to check my app when I get back to the shop. Well, test drive went good. He's not breaking up anymore, pulling hard. And according to this little app, which I don't think is completely accurate, it can't be. He just went at 15.1 in the quarter mile, 80 mile an hour. That don't seem quite right. And a 9.2 at 64 and an 8th. I don't know. It's probably not that accurate, but the main thing is I just wanted to make sure that he was running okay, that fixed our problem with cutting out. So seems to be running good now. So I'm not sure what the next upgrade or next deal we're going to be doing on Squeaky is. Of course, the main part of this video was to how to remove and install a distributor. Hopefully I answered all the questions you might have about that. If not, feel free to put a comment down below. I try to get to those if I can and do my best to answer them if I can. So we're going to end it off here. So until next time, y'all keep your square bodies rolling, and we'll catch you later.